Alright, hello and welcome to Class 1 on Heartstrings Lessons Patreon account. Today we're going to talk about setting musical goals and kind of how philosophy works. I am a philosophy major, and I think people usually think that philosophy majors are annoying. Why? I think it's because we talk about normative things such as music in our minds, which think we understand our minds and think we understand music. Music is always around our minds, or always around as well. However, why philosophy, I love it, is because we do talk about things that seem normal. And learning how to talk about things that seem normal is really how you can change things. You examine things that we do normally and see, like, is this really a good way to continue? And this thinking about what is right in front of us is how we develop new technology, and also how we can see what needs to be improved, how we can innovate. So, today with setting musical goals, I'm a musician. It takes a long time to sort of learn an instrument, but it takes almost longer for some people just to start. And the motivation to continue really comes down to the value of things. And we can make a long list of the values of music, which we'll get into throughout the course. But basically today, just going to talk about how do we value things, what is philosophy, and how do we achieve goals and the nature of it. So this is your introduction. Should be about 25 minutes. Normally I'd like to have this a live class, and then through the Discord app on Patreon you can send a voice message or a text message. Through there I'll respond to it when I ask questions. So it'll be a little bit more interactive, because the goal of this is not to sit here and listen to me talk sort of passively, which a lot of videos online tend to encourage. But to actually engage and think and participate, connect. That'd be more fun for me, and also a little bit more rewarding an experience, I think, for you. So, let's talk about what philosophy is and what philosophy isn't. This whiteboard, I'm going to move on to this side. So we have philosophy over here, and then we have what we call sophistry. So philosophers like Socrates were people who went around questioning normative values. He said, is this really the great way to run a society? Are these the values we should have? Are these people who we've elected to be in charge, are they actually speaking truth? Or is this just normal behavior that we've just kept on doing? And he was not well liked by people. He questioned authority, tried to get people to think for themselves and seek correct knowledge. Whereas sophists, he was against the sophists, because sophistry, they still do this. The book's out on Art of Persuasion, 50 Ways of Power. It's all about persuading people to do what you want, even if it's not necessarily in their interest, or if it's not even true. So the sophists were people that you could pay to teach you the art of persuasion in order to make you sound like you made better points, or to discredit somebody in their point and just make yours. So there's two ways of sophistry. One is persuading people to accept things that aren't necessarily true. The other is to just discredit people for even asking the question at all. So we don't want to be sophists. We want to be philosophers, and the way we do that is through normative values. We have to learn, like, what is the value between that. We have to find distinctions, and the two most normal things that I found in my life are music and my mind. So we'll say cognition. And just thinking about all the lists we can make. In philosophy, we try not to take lists, but we look at, like, well, how does this work? What would be the value of music? Why should we study our cognition? So what value and meaning does it have? So we typically will say that music, let's start with music for today. So music is good because it's creative, connects people emotionally. So we'll say emotional, expression, connection, meditation. I think the list could go on and on. Skill, blah, blah, blah. So, but when we look at why is being creative a good thing? Why is music something that we have to be creative? Why does our mind have this need to be creative. What is the value of that? So we take a step back. So what kind of values are there? Aristotle, down the lineage of Socrates and Plato, has in his Nicomachean Ethics, there are basically two types of values in the world. Or I guess two ways to talk about values. So there are things that are intrinsic, meaning that they are in it of themselves valuable. So like they contain some value in themselves. They're good for something in it. And then there's extrinsic, which means that the value of the thing does not lie within it itself, but it is good for achieving a goal somewhere else, such as money is not valuable in the paper, but it is valuable in the goals that it allows you to complete. And when we talk about cognition, our motivational states, how we're going to build communities, find meaning, goals typically give people meaning, which we'll talk about later. So today is how we talk about goals and like what type of goals and values we should have around that and how it applies to some of these things in music. So there's inner things that are valuable, there's things that are valuable outside themselves, then there is things that we call metaphysical, which is a great word, but really just means like this actually exists in the world. It is there. So there must be some value of this in the world. I'll make a chart. And then there is psychological, meaning it is in the mind. So already we're starting to get into the cognitive part of this course. So, and it's not saying, let me explain these a little bit more. So, grab this real quick. Make sure I do this right, because sometimes it gets confusing and I don't want to mess it up. So, we have our metaphysical, things that are in the universe that are intrinsically good in it of themselves, not for something else. This is going to come down to like things like, when people say like, what is good in it itself, I guess we'd say love, creativity probably be in it, love, joy, friendship, these kinds of things. Peace is good. Yeah, so we usually say like in the world these things must be good. They're good in and of themselves. They don't need anything else. You can never have too much peace, right? So this is metaphysical. It's in the world. Now we have an intrinsic psychological. So something that you value for its own sake, but is in the mind. So I think a funny one of this would be like hoarders. So like hoarders will have all these magazines that like they've never read, or this manual from a really long time, and they find it valuable in itself and they just want them. They're not good for anything anymore. It's outdated. They don't even have maybe the calculator that they keep the manual for, but they find it valuable in and of itself. So they believe that it has intrinsic value. So we're going to say hoarders for this one. Then we have extrinsic psychological values. So that means that it's good. I believe this will help me out in my mind. If I believe this, then it should be true. So let's say something like, if I look at a poster of Angus Young, the guitar player from AC/DC, every day, I will become like Angus Young. So does that actually happen by looking at something, or like by staring at a poster? Do you actually get better at music? No. You can believe it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Or if I believe that I will eat chalk, or like I'll lick this marker, that I will grow taller. Like I can believe that, but it doesn't actually happen in the world. So we could say like superstitions, I guess. I believe if I wear this shirt, that my team will win Super Bowl. Those kinds of things. Then we have extrinsic metaphysical values. So if you believe that if I turn off this light switch and the light works, it will turn off, that will happen. If you think I will take steroids and I will run faster, that will happen. It has nothing to do with your belief. The actions you take towards that goal actually allow it to continue. So we could say steroids, or eating healthy, like you'll become healthier. I guess that's an obvious statement, but we'll go with steroids. So, but if we go back for a second and look at music, so what are all these things? Why do people do these things? Why do people make music? What lies in the mind? Because we do have this psychological state, but then we're also looking for a metaphysical state, something intrinsically valuable in itself that actually exists in the world. This usually is going to come down to like God. People will say like all things, God is good in and of itself. All things lead to God. Or choice. Or happiness. Because we have to think about, well, what makes anything valuable? What makes anything good? What makes a good human being? Well, it serves its purpose, right? So steroids serve a purpose in the world. You take them, they serve their purpose to make you faster. If we look at superstitions don't necessarily operate as a beneficial thing in the world, but maybe in your mind they make you happier. Psychological hoarders, this thing might not be actually valuable in the world, but in your mind it leads to you being happy, thinking that it's your own sake. If we look at the long run, maybe it doesn't, so this might be an abnormal psychology problem. But if we really look at all these things, steroids, why do people want to run faster? Why do people want their team to win? It's to basically be happy. Why do people want choice? Because usually having choice means people are happy. So Aristotle said the goal of all things should be happiness. And this is what drives people. Well, how do we get to happiness? How does this goal help us to become happy? What kind of happiness is this if we take a step back? So you probably heard of the word euthanasia, meaning the good death. So Aristotle had his term eudaimonia, which means the blessed life. So this isn't the type of happiness that is short-lived, instantly gratifying. It's built off of making continual right decisions in his virtue theory. So say good life, but more of a blessed life overall. A good lived, I'll say, a good lived life. So, if all things are meant to be happy, then we look at peace and it's like, why do people want to be peaceful? Well, it's because peace brings happy. Why do people want friendship? Because having friends means happy. Why do people want money? Because money makes people happy. You can do more things, you have more choice with more money, so then you're more happy. So a lot of things are going to fit into extrinsic. Scrooge would say like money is actually valuable in itself, so that would be like a psychological, I actually think this gold coin is valuable. I find value in it. Superstitions would be like, if I do this ritual before I stock trade, maybe, then I will be successful, blah, blah, blah. But all of these are hoping to achieve some happiness either in the mind or otherwhere else. So in music, we think about how are we going to learn music? What will music bring to my life? How are we going to motivate ourselves? What are our motives? Are they actually good in and of themselves? Is learning an instrument good in and of itself? Where does it fall in? Well, if you do have an instrument, then yes, you can learn about your cognition. You can learn how you learn. You can do a whole list of how your brain changes, which we'll get into later on. You'll build musical communities. You can make protest songs. So yeah, learning an instrument is extrinsically good and could lead to happiness in yourself, achievement on a goal. So if we're going to do that, we need to practice, right? Practice is a big thing. So Aristotle's virtue theory on how we achieve goals really relies on habits, right? You can't be a vegetarian for one day and then say you're a vegetarian. It has to be a longer period of time than that. You can't become healthy just working out one day a year. That's not going. That's not being an exerciser. So you have to find moderation and habit in all things, and it's best to find moderation. So he has this virtue theory where we have, let's use courage. Let's say creativity, because that's more of a musical thing. So let's say you're eccentric, too creative, or boring. So here's the struggle, I think, in art a lot of times, and music, is there are people who want to push the boundaries, and then there are people that want to stay within it. You can't be too creative, because then you're seen as eccentric, and you make songs that are you just sitting at a piano protesting music, as postmodern music would be, or avant-garde noise trash, which probably is a genre. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's eccentric. Then you have boring music. I'm not sure what music you find boring, but substitute one in there. So you should probably have this middle range, which I think like Jimi Hendrix does a good job of, being a little bit eccentric, but still like within this moderation of sort of still playing off like classic rock and roll and familiar blues sort of tricks. And he also has different habits that he continues to do. He practiced every day. He like slept with the guitar. So in order to have a good life, you probably need to seek moderation in all things and stay away from boringness and eccentricity. Now, in music, our mind is going to balance between these. I don't think being boring is bad. There's a lot of things that you might want to do in music that are going to seem boring and they're going to be painful. But Aristotle would say that you can't shy away from things that cause pain if they lead to a good life. Does the effort that you're putting into this right now lead to a better life playing music? Does it lead to a better motivational state, which we'll talk about later? So, when we get into this, I really want to, when I practice, there are some things that seem boring, but then as you interpret them, you can start to move over here and you kind of balance. And learning really on music is going to be balancing between this and that until you find that median point. And ultimately, I think we need to decide, like when we learned an instrument, what will actually be the value of it. If we want to do it as a, you can make music whatever value you want. You can put it psychologically, superstitiously, and we're kind of use all of these values as we go forward in our minds. So basically we have these goals, and then we want achievement, that hopefully leads to happiness on our instrument. So with our goals in philosophy, we could talk about all the goals you should have in music, but really in philosophy we talk about the links between this. So this is more going to be the virtue theory. How do we achieve goals? Well, it's not going to be by being boring all the time. It's not going to be by just going and doing whatever we want and just like letting everything free all the time. This is the jazz sort of concept. Learn all the rules and then break all the rules and then forget all the rules and just and then actually pause and then meditate and focus on the sound. There's an interesting link I'll probably post with Jacob Collier and Herbie Hancock, and he teaches harmony at 5 levels, and you can see how as you get more and more advanced in music to like Herbie Hancock, piano player from Miles Davis Quartet, and his own solo projects, how his whole thing was music is just life. It's just life experience. But everyone before that would be, what about the third and the augmented seventh and the ascension and the descension? And he's just kind of, yeah, you know, like you want to think about arrival. So if you're going from a down chord, then you're going up, maybe it'll feel like you're uplifting. Maybe if you're going from up to down, that'll feel like going down. So he starts to model it in a more like not so intellectual, not so intuitive, right in the middle between it. So he starts to mix it, and this is a result of practice. This is a result of playing continuously for 40 years. And we're going to talk about how we develop these shortcuts later on when we talk about heuristics. So a majority of the course is going to focus on how this happens. And then when we see achievement, how what would an achievement be, and how does that link to us becoming more happy? So we have three things, and intermediately we're going to talk about it. Today we talked about the nature of goals. Extrinsic things, extrinsic metaphysical things allow you to actually achieve your goals by doing them. So just taking steroids will actually make you faster, whether you believe in it or not. Superstitions would be like, I believe this has superstitions are good for something else, even though it doesn't. Chalk, you can believe if you eat it, or if I lick this, that I'll grow taller, but it won't. It's thinking that something is intrinsically value, like I love this marker, even though I think it has value in and of itself. I don't care if it breaks, I don't care if it doesn't work, I just like this marker. This is going to be a psychological belief. And then we have the intrinsic metaphysical beliefs. And I guess as a last added bonus, because I just want to talk about this now, would be the existentialists. They said, since most of this is just a pattern of people believing that happiness is the best thing, that everything would just be, that happiness is the goal of all things, that basically everybody would just be having intrinsically psychological, no one's seen happiness, just what we've all sort of decided. So the existentialists viewed choice sort of as one, that there is nothing valuable, so we cross this whole thing out. The second is that there is only within the mind what you choose to be happy. So they still believe that choice would sort of fit in here, but then I would still argue that having choice makes people happy, and they would say that the problem of freedom is having too much freedom means too much choice, which creates anxiety, which doesn't. But then if we look at the virtue theory, you don't want too many choices, because then how do you know which one? But then you don't want no choice. So we're still in this moderation thing, which is why I like using this to evaluate different music. Is your music actually good in and of itself? Like, that's a hard question. Are you motivated by something that will actually help you get better? Are you practicing in a way that actually yields results, or just things that you've sort of believed and feel comfortable in that make you happy? I'm not trying to say at the end of this that extrinsic things are bad. Like, they don't have to be steroids. Being creative can bring happiness to a lot of people. Being creative can help you in your life. And emotional expression, which we'll talk about, and how we interpret language, how we express emotions through translation, how our mind does that and how we communicate it, and how music is a cognitive communicator in later courses. So meditation, like, these aren't bad things. I'm not saying it's bad just because it's extrinsic and in and of itself. It's good. It's not, or it's bad. It's not saying you can't value things in and of themselves. Like, we value some music just because we like it. It doesn't have to be good. It can be like trash music. But we'll find out a little bit about how we design those guilty pleasures and how music industry does that, and what scientific tests they actually do. So, check out the syllabus. It's actually pretty, I've posted it down there. The course has a lot of things you check out. I want to, again, do this sort of a live thing where I'll have my paper or my computer sitting out there, and you can respond and ask me questions as we go along. And I also like you guys to kind of do these. I'm playing both parts right now as well. So, quick recap. Yeah, we had sophistry, music, cognition, these values, and eudaimonia is the goal. These are like your big values that are really going to be argued. Really, people, whenever they make an argument, they're going to value God, choice, or happiness in a musical argument. Say, like, well, it's their choice to make this music. It's my choice as an artist to make this music. Or it'd say, like, well, it makes them happy. It makes me happy. Or it says, music is for God, this music is not for God. So that's either they're going to be the values. Really it's going to be like, oh, this music isn't creative. Well, why is not being creative good? Because you're not using, creativity implies that you're expanding, that you're doing, creating something not in the world. You're making something new. You're using all these choices and compiling them into something which is choice, but also leads to happiness. We think creativity makes people happy, or that it's from God. So really take any one of these and you're going to argue it through that. or at least express your ideas through it. I've really picked music because it is so normative and it's a good tool and flavor to kind of teach about these things. So, I'm Grant Sherrod. That's class 1. Class 2, we're going to talk about how musical communities are formed through these values, through Aristotle's part 2 of his Ethics on Friendship, what type of friends there are applied through these values, because this is how we make music as a group. This is why music came about as a emotional and evolutionary advantage to bond, and that's why we have these different modules in our brain responsible for melody and rhythm, composition, abstract thinking. It was and copying. That's another one. Copying is a big fun thing scientifically to talk about. Why do people copy? So check out the syllabus. I'm really excited to teach this, and I'm glad I could talk about this. This is what I use a lot in my life, and I wish I would have known it a lot earlier. So we have extrinsic metaphysical values. I have some questions that if you wanted to answer, such as, which I'll include, and as well, what are these type of values? Can you explain it? Intrinsically metaphysical value. Can you explain an extrinsic metaphysical value? And then what is the goal that all things lead to? What is the goal of human life? Because the goal implies a purpose. So what is the purpose of human life? What is the purpose that all things strive to achieve? And then apply that to your own life. Try to be happy. Think about what will actually bring happiness in the long run to live a good lived life. And philosophy definitely is that for me. So we could talk forever on this and apply different things. I think that's good for now. This heartstring lessons, check back in. I have some practice lessons on scales. Probably going to seem boring, but then we're going to make it eccentric, and then you're going to make it your own in moderation. And I have a video explaining that, as well as some classical guitar exercises, some rock guitar exercises, even a ukulele, some banjo going in on there too. So thank you so much. Check it out. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to do 2 videos a month on this class on here. If I can get 200 people to subscribe to the channel, then I'll double it. I'll do it every week. There's plenty of things we can talk about in music. Check out the syllabus, and I will see you next time. Keep practicing.